The Unitarian Universalist Church of Ventura, California, presents a homily by our minister, the Reverend Dana Worsnop, titled Liberation of Perfectionism, recorded on Sunday morning, July 19th, 2020.
In the movie, A League of Their Own, Tom Hanks famously said, "There's no crying in baseball." A tennis friend of mine once shared her addendum: "There's no sorry in tennis." Most of the women I play tennis doubles with will say sorry whenever they miss a shot, as if they are supposed to get every ball that comes anywhere near them. I do it too, and it drives me crazy. Even when an opponent has hit a clear winner at an amazing angle, 5 feet out of reach, my partner will immediately dissect what she should have done. "I'm sorry, I should have been moving in. I'm sorry, I should have gotten my racket on that." Even if it was me, their partner, who made the actual error, popping up a fat, juicy ball right in our opponent's wheelhouse that got drilled back at us. Or maybe nobody made a mistake. Someone just made a really, really good shot. Underlying all these sorries is a perfectionism that is written into our cultural DNA. An expectation that we get things right the first time, that mistakes are proof that we are not good enough. This is probably a general human foible, yet I note the particular power of a puritanical legacy for us in America. I see this in myself and my tennis friends. I see it in the kids I taught. I see it all through our culture. Many of us speak of a perfectionist, inner critical voice, ever ready to find fault. Yet paradoxically, the inner critic actually keeps us from doing or being our best, our most fully human. It holds us back way too often, holds us back out of fear of making a mistake. And yet to be human is by definition imperfect. Poet Mary Oliver tells us, "You do not have to be good. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves." And yes, this does mean there will also be sorrow and despair, failures, pain and loss, and we will always have that to share with one another. Perfectionism has stalked me my whole life. Yet I always thought it was a personal issue, a personal failing of mine. So if I didn't get it right, I always thought it was a personal failing. And so I didn't get it right away when I first heard that perfectionism is a symptom of white supremacy culture. One explanation that helped this make sense to me came from my dear friend and this church's affiliated community minister for 5 years, the Reverend Carolyn Price. She said simply, "Perfectionism is just another ism, another form of oppression." Oh, So it's another way to separate people, to define an in-group and an out-group, keeping those deemed less than perfect out of the center, keeping them on the margins. I am far from perfect. And yet, as a white, able-bodied woman of significant privilege, I reside far closer to what our culture would hold up as perfect. And so it helps me to imagine the messages people with physical disabilities hear. And the messages are not just that they have imperfect bodies, but every time they encounter a place that isn't accessible to them, the culture is telling them that they don't matter, that they are not as valuable, that they are not as welcome, they are not as needed in the places where so many of us just walk in without thinking. And so I invite us to consider what other kinds of perfectionism exclude others. What perfectionisms exclude you? What kinds of things are you included in and yet exclude others? There are class and education, race and ethnicity markers that tell people that the way they speak or write or the places they shop are below expectations. Perfectionism can be very subtle, even a passive form of exclusion. And I do fear that it is very likely the kind of ism, the quiet kind of ism that Unitarian Universalists too often communicate without even realizing it. For none of us feel perfect. We are all in some way or another a cracked pot. And still, this kind of cultural perfectionism is exactly what holds some even farther away from what is deemed perfect. And ultimately, we are all damaged by it, even as some of us also benefit. From an essay on fashion in the Atlantic by Amanda Mull, telling people what they should look like often also requires telling them what is unacceptable. To spend money on feeling better, people first need to feel bad. For decades, the fashion industry tolerated nearly no dark skin, fat bodies, wrinkles, or other flaws, blemishes, or physical characteristics outside an impossible ideal. This is just another way to separate people, especially when what is perfect or even acceptable is narrowly defined. It keeps those deemed less than perfect far from the center of our culture. This is wildly obvious in fashion, though it applies well beyond what we wear and how we look. As our teenage songwriter, Hadley Shea, sang earlier, high standards make us feel low. And advertisers of just about any product know this only too well. So they deliberately create insecurity and then they prey upon it for profit. This is one of the most insidious sides of perfectionism. The Reverend Nancy MacDonald Ladd wrote about how perfectionism diminishes us all in a UU World article a couple of years ago. It was called Nothing We Do Will Be Perfect. To work for justice, religious liberals should let perfectionism go. She writes, we are not going to win. Ew, really? Ew. She goes on, nothing in the work of dismantling racism and opposing white supremacy is inherently doable. And nothing that you or any of us bring into this work will ultimately result in a perfect outcome, especially one so gloriously successful that people of color among us will line up to give the white people among us gold stars for our efforts. Ouch. Listening to that with the ears of perfectionism, that sounds pretty hopeless, even grim. Yet Ladd offers a path through it, though getting there means giving up some cherished assumptions. Nothing we do will ever be perfect. It will not always or even very often feel good to be in the trenches of the fight to decenter white normative culture in our congregations and in the world. Rather, she tells us, it will break you open. It will break you open if you're paying attention, and your heartbreak will not always be directed out there, but sometimes right at home into the very deepest recesses of your own soul, where you and I and all of us will come to the dawning realization that we are not now and never have been innocent or perfect or pure. Yet it is from this humility gained in that understanding, it is with this humility that the path forward appears. As I have been speaking this morning, you have been seeing images from Joe and Sylvia Hutchins' garden. Cracked rocks, a hand mosaic flower pot broken by one dog, a one-eared rabbit statue broken by another dog, a broken cookie jar that came from Joe's grandmother. All things broken and cracked, far less than perfect. And yet they are beautiful. There is something powerful in their beauty and in their brokenness, especially in the context of the larger garden, which just holds everything so beautifully. As civil rights leader Brian Stevenson tells us, we are all broken. This picture is from my own garden. It's another flower pot that Sylvia mosaicked with a chalice design in it. And coincidentally, my new puppy Jasper broke it into all these pieces just this past week. I was not happy with him at all. And yet, Joe's pictures helped me see that there is beauty in this brokenness, beauty and power, and I'm going to find a place for those broke pieces in my garden. It is the broken among us who can teach us the way compassion works, Ladd tells us. It is the broken who understand the power of mercy, the power of justice. It is the broken that yearn for redemption, for reconciliation. The broken who can teach us how we love despite our brokenness. And it is in brokenness that I realized I'm not just fighting for the condemned, she writes. I'm fighting for myself. Yet, if nothing less than A+ feels good enough, we are less likely to try on the new behaviors the new situations call us to. We're less likely to accept new ideas for fear of looking foolish, missing the shot, feeling vulnerable. We have to let go perfectionism, which also means letting go of a sense of control, which also means letting go of a sense of independence. We are all broken, and we are all in this together. Yet the gift of finding your place in the family of things is that it is a family. It's imperfect too, and we are in this together. One way of dismantling all of this work of dismantling white supremacy is challenging work. It will not be especially uncomfortable. How many of you really say, wow, I just want to enter into that fraught territory because it's so darn much fun? It will not be especially uncomfortable. It will not be especially comfortable. Yet it can also be deeply satisfying because it is the work of human mending, of healing and reconciliation. And it can carry us to a place we want to be that is diverse and real and ultimately beautiful. Flawed, cracked, beautiful, and beloved community. A few strategies for working on perfectionism. One of them is sometimes called managing expectations or lowering expectations, or I think it also might mean expecting to make mistakes. Making a mistake is a good thing because it shows that you're trying. Another good antidote to perfectionism is building a culture of affirmation. In tennis, now, rather than blaming myself or my partner for missing the ball, I try to praise my opponent on a good shot, a good serve, even when I'm aced and it goes flying by me. Maybe especially when I'm aced and the serve goes flying by me. It's a subtle change and it feels good. And it even helps me affirm and acknowledge my own good shots. And it often changes the whole dynamic on the court. I play better and hopefully we all do. And we can grow into a culture of appreciation and affirmation, expecting mistakes and appreciating them as a chance to learn and grow. It can shift a sense of despair at what is amiss in the world, to hope that we still can change. We can change in our hearts, and oh, good golly, maybe we can change the world. We are not here to keep the rules, but to keep covenant. My friend Teresa Soto writes, the light must spill to shine, which sometimes means that the pot needs to crack. The thing you must be is yourself, shedding the willingness to journey alone. You are human. You belong right here, right now. Together, we will chase away the sickness, the secrets, leaving only the open possibility that the future is a space for growth. Amen. May it be so.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to Liberation of Perfectionism, presented by the Reverend Dana Worsnop, recorded on July 19th, 2020, for the Unitarian Universalist Church of Ventura, California.